Hey y'all, happy Mental Health Monday. Hashtag God is mental health. I am so excited to be able to share these words with y'all and finally express it, get it out. I'm happy for the opportunity and yeah. Anyways, being done. So, y'all, I want to share why not? I want to share on why we like toxic relationships. So, yeah, I was watching these videos and these podcasts on how the brain works, right? And it was talking about how our brains are like our brain waves go like this, right? It's like the heart monitors things where there's the line that goes straight, right? So our brain waves, when we're calm, when we're at peace, there's no stress, and we're feeling positive, grateful, all the good feelings, our brain waves are going like this, right? It's at a flat line. However, when something negative, a negative thought pops up in our mind, somebody says something negative, a stressor in our life comes up, any kind of negativity, our brain waves start to go like this, right? And the reason for it is because we're processing, right? We're trying to figure out how to manage this, whatever it is, right? The negative thought, because it goes in conflict with our beliefs, what we've managed, how we've decided to handle life, right? But when negativity comes up, it causes us to question or doubt the way that we've been functioning, right? Sorry, my signs are messed up. So when we get into these relationships, a lot of our relationships that we get into are toxic, and they're toxic because a lot of us have gotten used to stress, to negativity, to trauma, right? And we become desensitized by it. So we're no longer bothered. We become used to it, right? So what happens is when we become used to stress, especially when we've grown up in stressful environments, dealing with toxicity, abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, neglect, anything like that, we become used to it. It becomes a pattern of behavior or a lifestyle for us. Right. So our brains are constantly, when we're living in stress, our brains are constantly going like this, right? So when we get to a place in our life where it's not as stressful, right? Then the brainwaves are going like this again. And we're not used to it. So it becomes stress, right? It causes us to doubt again, and then we go back into that, right? Because we're not used to it. So this is why we love or get into toxic relationships with people, because we've gotten used to it. We're not used to real love, real peace. So it scares us, right? It causes us to doubt or fear. So what happens is when we have a toxic relationship and somebody's, giving us the silent treatment or saying negative things to us or physically abusing us or whatever it is, right? What happens is our stress response starts, going, and our adrenaline starts rushing. And we feel emotions, right? And this is what we've been feeling. We feel safe. We feel comfortable with these feelings because we've always had them since we've grown up, right? That stress feeling. So because we're feeling that feeling, we mistake it for safety, for comfort, right? And then we wind up staying in toxic relationships. We misunderstand the signals that our body is telling us. So that's why sometimes we can wind up in relationships where it's so intense, it's so passionate, and we can mistake our stress response for passion or for intimacy. I was watching a video and she said we mistake intensity for intimacy, right? So those intense feelings we feel when we're in these toxic relationships, the up and down, the cycle of abuse, the honeymoon period, then being mean, and then the honeymoon period, like the cycle that we're feeling is intense. We feel all these emotions, and then we mistake them for intimacy, or we have trauma bonds, right, with people who have similar traits as us, right, or compatible traits. So if someone is compatible traits, meaning someone who can spark those stress response in you, like you're used to, right? So if you're used to growing up in an environment where your father was not around, or your mom was not around, or you were emotionally neglected or physically neglected, let's follow with emotionally neglected, right? Because I feel like this is for most of us, especially in the Black community, because we got disrespected by our parents, okay? I'm just gonna say that. So we become used to this disrespect, and we get into these relationships where we're still constantly being disrespected, but we allow it. We stay in the situation, the relationship, because we're used to it, because it feels safe, because we've grown up in it. We're used to it. So our brain mistakes it as safety, or as comfort, or as intimacy. So yeah, emotional neglect is when you grow up and you find a partner who also experienced emotional neglect, or they've experienced some other kind of trauma that made them have a avoidant personality type, or avoidant attachment type, to where the person is not emotionally available to you because they are afraid of vulnerability. They have trust issues and all this stuff, right? So because sometimes we grew up in an environment where our parents are, off and on. Some days they love us, some days they don't. And it creates an insecure attachment style in us, where we're constantly trying to figure out, and we're feeling anxious about our behaviors, because we've been so used to adjusting to our parents' emotional state that we become used to and comfortable with adjusting to our partner's emotional state and trying to figure them out and please them, right? Because we become used to it. That's a trauma bond, right? Because you guys have trauma that complements each other. So there's also that feeling of stress that causes the adrenaline, right? And then we mistake it for chemistry, right? Or but the crazy part is, when you're in a constant state of stress, the other parts of your so when we're in a stressful state all the time, or up and down, then other parts of our body, when we're in a stress state, other parts of our body shuts down, because all the energy goes to focusing on that situation or that thing, right? And so we're not functioning, we're not living a whole abundant life, because we're so focused in on this toxic relationship. And we're We're not focused on how healthy we're eating, or drinking our water and sipping our own tea and minding our business, right? We're not able to focus on ourselves and grow ourselves because we're so focused on this toxic relationship, because it's triggering stress response, and we have to process. We have to solve the problem before we can move on to anything else. So if you're stuck in, if you're having constant problems in your relationship, then how are you going to be able to focus on developing yourself and working on yourself and growing yourself and growing your career, growing your kids, growing your anything else, right? You can't have a full, abundant life because you're so focused in on this one area. And it's really hard to not focus on it because it's something that's not resolved, and our brains need to find resolve in things. We need to find meaning in things. That's just how we work biologically, right? So stress is normal, right? We're supposed to stress is a normal part of life. We are supposed to experience moments of confusion or conflict to help us grow, right? So a problem arises, we figure out, we find the meaning, and then we solve it and we learn something new. We build our character, we establish ourselves in that area, and then we move on to the next problem and the next problem and the next problem, and then we get better and better and better, right? However, in the relationships, so in those situations, the stress, that good stress that helps us to grow, there's these situations that happen because of negative brainwaves. We process it, work it out, and then we receive a higher level of consciousness, a deepening sense of self, right? However, in bad stress, we don't get that. We don't get that boost of confidence. We don't get that boost of sense of self or knowledge or wisdom or anything. We don't process it or get a higher level of consciousness. We actually start to decline, right? Because we don't get that meaning. So we are operating in a lower sense of self, right? A lower sense of consciousness, because we have our minds. When you have the good stress, right? You have the good stress. We hone in on one situation, and then we're able to open our minds up back to, when we process it, we can open our minds up back, and then we have more information, more knowledge, so it opens us up more. We become bigger. Our consciousness becomes bigger, right? But then when we're dealing with negative stress and not unresolved stress, we hone in on that situation, and we never fully get meaning out of it. So we can hone in on it. We let it go for a second, hone in on it again, let it go for a second, hone in on it again, let it go for a second. And we just stuck in this cycle of back and forthness. And we never get to develop our consciousness. We never get to build ourselves and deepen our awareness, right? So we actually get stuck in this cycle, which can cause a decline because the rest of our bodies, the rest of our brain is not functioning as well as it usually should, right? So that's the difference between good stress and bad stress. Conflict comes, but is it improving you? Is it making you better, or is it making you worse? Which one is it? Which one? Because there are some relationships that we may be in, and it's causing conflict within us, but it's causing our character to grow. It's causing our character to grow. And I was reading something about twin flames, and I don't know about all the other side of the spirituality stuff, right? But it was talking about how sometimes some people can come into your life and cause conflict and then leave, because that conflict is helping you develop your character. So sometimes there are some people that are them display toxic relationships. However, um, sometimes we we can't be completely closed off to them if the conflict is helping us grow and developing our character. There are some people that come into our lives, and even though they're causing difficulties, right? It's not you, it's them. You're learning something every time you encounter them. You set your boundaries. You have more understanding. You have more wisdom in how to approach situations. This is why God said trials builds your character and perseverance, right? Um, so I just found it funny because I remember listening to a sermon and he was talking about the devil. The devil is searching around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And that lion, the lion is loud, right? It's loud, it's intense. Your emotions can get loud, right? And because it's so loud, we can focus on the loudness instead of that still, quiet voice. The peace, the love, the calm, the challenges in different areas that we're not used to. We can run from those and then accept the challenges that are not growing us, right? Because we're used to it. Because it doesn't require us to do anything but do the same things that we've been doing, right? So similar values is what intimacy is, not personality. Functionality is intimacy. So if you are able to function together in similar values, right? So sometimes we can think that we're functioning and we're supposed to be together because we're both functioning just right in our trauma. In our pain, in our hurt. We both can smoke weed together and sleep all day, right? We can both go out and come back at the same time, right? We can both eat a lot, right? And we think that's functionality, but that's functionality in dysfunction, right? You're working well in dysfunction. So how you know a relationship is good is if you have similar values, your core values, and you are able to function appropriately in those values, not in the trauma responses, right? Yeah, I just wanted to share that. I don't know why I just felt led to share that, but hopefully it helps someone. Love you guys. Be best. Bye.